Hi everybody, welcome to 7-Minute Health Chat with Robin and Kim. Guess what? Kim's not here today, but look who I have back again today. Dr. B,
Hello.
Heather Bartlett from MetaboLab. So last week, Dr. Bartlett told us all about cellular health, kind of the scientific aspect of it. Some of you might have been like, what are they talking about? I don't know what metabolic means. I don't know what cellular health is. So today, Dr. B has been nice enough to give us some more of her time and kind of go into more specifics on what she can do for you or for me. I'm very selfish. I want to know what she can do to help improve my health. So we're going to talk more about like diabetes, insulin resistance, maybe a little bit of hormones, anti-aging. What are some of the other things?
It'll come.
It'll come. So we're going to take you on a little tour of her office here in Clintonville, which is amazing. It's a very nice
You
office.
can that way.
Oh, okay, there we go.
You know, might as well see. There we go.
So if you're in Columbus, Ohio, it's right here in the center of the city. If you're not, you do online.
Yes, and so I do a complimentary consult, basically, just running. There's so much science, so much data to grab that somebody needs to see what all the offerings are. So when we talk, if somebody decides to do a paid consult, it makes more sense of everything that we're going after and we're looking at and we're considering for utilization for that individual's data. So that second one too, because we walk through this whole thing, it is also on Zoom. So it's very easy for people. There's not a huge time commitment if you're coming from anywhere in suburbia or even from downtown, or you just don't want to leave your house because it's getting into winter. All of those things are fine. So yeah, first
All
year,
right.
and then after that, then it's like it's go time, and then I meet you here. We do our thing here.
Perfect.
So come on back.
All right, awesome.
Waiting for my videographer.
She's a great videographer too.
Welcome to the exam room. So when people get here, like they come in for their evaluation, usually the first evaluation, I'll do a quick overview of what that looks like, and then we're going to go into the topics, if that's okay.
Yep.
So it's actually a really short visit, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 45 at the most. And that's just if somebody is a harder stick or they feel faint or something like that. But I just want to make sure everybody is prepped for their body composition and their resting metabolic rate testing, which I'll show you in just a minute. And because we want accuracy. Anything that's inaccurate is not useful to anybody, as we've talked about multiple times. And a lot of people will think about just doing something for somebody, but not thinking about the accuracy, and I really care about that.
Yeah.
So you come in, you're gonna kick off your shoes, and then I'm actually gonna get your exact height with this actual ultrasound device that literally gets us down to fractional height, which is useful because a lot of people don't realize that over time, perhaps we've gotten a little shorter. And
I'm gonna stop her right there. When she told me this earlier, guys, I just told her last year I went and I had my height done at the doctor's and I had lost 3/4 of an inch in like 1 year. So yeah.
Turning off my background music just to be safe. This little chirp, I'm going to turn it off in a second so it doesn't keep chirping at us. That's actually the resting metabolic rate machine telling us it's ready and calibrated.
Awesome.
So just let me turn that off so it doesn't keep.
Well, you can tell us about it while you're turning it off. How about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I have a demo piping here, so to speak. So with this, we don't want somebody having taken any stimulants or exercised in the morning. We don't want them having any unusual mouthwash, anything that could affect anything going on with the biome in the mouth and the breath.
Wow.
And so we got that prep done. So if somebody checks all the boxes and they are totally resting, because we're going after the resting metabolic rate here, then next thing is we're going to sit down, you're going to kick out, spread your legs out, you can have a seat, Robin.
So tell them why are we interested in knowing what our resting metabolic rate is?
Well, this ties into the conversation about diabetes and insulin resistance. We give a lot of advice about what somebody should consume, how much they should consume, and the truth is, even if somebody is doing, quote, the standard 2,000 calorie diet a day, that could be grossly overestimated for a lot of individuals. I've seen that many times with people where somebody thinks, well, I'm actually doing good because I'm eating a 2,000. They may have been consuming more than that, and that, just as a fact, that's not an uncommon thing. And so when they kind of rein it in and they get to a 2,000 calorie a day diet, they think that they're like doing really well.
So then, quick question, because this came up because I had my first consult with her. You can also help figure out how much protein we need, how much carbohydrates, so our macros as well, right?
We can do that with the genetic testing.
Okay.
Yes. So this, what we get as a sample report, just to kind of show, I'm going to come in closer, let you adjust as you need to, but we get a basic, there'll be a number here of our resting energy expenditure, our resting metabolic rate. Above that is a number of calories, like an additional amount of calories that just in being alive and lifestyle. And above that is actually what this person, based off their metabolic burn with exercise, what they are likely the most that they're going to be burning. And that's really getting people to really doing exercise, not kind of doing exercise that we were talking about earlier, which I appreciate everybody who makes an effort towards activity.
So it's not just taking a walk with your dog around the block.
It's not, unfortunately.
Okay, I feel like I'm sitting on the job.
Yeah, I did a good kick there, you got it.
Okay.
And so, anyways, it's a very easy test. The worst part of it, in my opinion, is the nose pincher, because we want to collect all the breath through indirect colorimetry, just measuring oxygen and have a seat, plug it in, sit down, pinch your nose. You can take this in and out as you need to, just for a few seconds. If you need to swallow, feel funny, take the nose thing off, just for a few seconds, put it back on. It's not one of those unbearable things. And then this machine is smart enough that it will, once you kind of calm down, because it's an unusual thing having to breathe through your mouth for 10-15 minutes. Once it sees that you've calmed down and you're doing a normal respiratory pattern, that's actually when it starts doing it. So it's very smart, it's very wise on its calibration for accuracy again.
So once you find out someone's metabolic system rate, then what?
Well, now we know actually, so we've gotten one part of the equation for that person, which is what if they are trying to do an energy deficit, how many calories a day they need to. By the same token, if somebody is an ultra marathoner and they're trying to make sure they're consuming enough calories, we need to know maybe if they need to add more calories.
Nice.
Okay, so that's the first component of what are we looking at calorically for our goals, and that's the only way to really answer that. I'm not sure if many physicians around here, there may be some that have it, but most commonly you're going to find this at OSU in their kinesiology center. So that's the resting metabolic. So checkbox there, we know the number of calories. So then we're going to switch places over here.
Okay.
And going back to the body composition machine, what we're looking to understand better is we're looking at skeletal muscle mass. We're looking at total body fat percentages. We're looking at limb to limb, how much we have of each, including trunk. It is a very relevant conversation because, as you know very well, in the personal fitness world, the BMI can be a very inaccurate thing.
Yeah.
So you can monitor BMI, but it's not actually really telling you what's happening in your body. And like what we talked about, we can be wearing the same size clothing for 10 years, and our body is totally shifting underneath what's happening underneath it. And but it's a very subtle thing. And for if nothing else, I mean, people probably should get this checked at least once a year to start to know when their body is starting to change. For some people, it could be in their 30s, it could be in their 40s, it could be 50s, it could be in their 60s. But that realization and that honesty really makes a difference.
Yeah.
I've got a fire station right across the street, so
That's
you'll hear that every once in a while. So that's what we're looking for here, because then we have, this isn't a oh no moment. This is my starting point. Same thing with the resting metabolic rate testing. This isn't a, oh man, I've been doing this wrong for a long time, I had no idea.
Right.
This is, okay, here we go. Part 2 of the map. I know I need to put on more lean muscle mass. I know what my visceral fat content is that we can actually monitor here. And they've made this an oversimplified thing, just looking at the single digit and double digit. But if you can get somebody less than 10 on this visceral fat level, this is what they've looked at in their studies, you can decrease somebody's cardiovascular risk and somebody's risk of diabetes by 50%.
Wow.
So our visceral fat, kind of tying in quickly about like diabetes and insulin resistance, this is super hormonally active fat, the fat that's around our internal organs. So quick little biology lesson just as a reminder, like we have fat that's supposed to be in there, and that's good, and that's called our omentum. It's a protective sheet of fat that's around like a lot of the blood vessels and the lymph nodes. But then we start getting that enlarged, and then we actually start creating fat around the actual internal organs. Now, bad analogy, but if you can picture a chicken breast that has too much fat on the outside that you're like cutting off perhaps for prep, that's the kind of fat that we're kind of thinking about. If you can think about it, it seems so unreal, so abstract, but being able to monitor and know that is a big deal. It is just super inflammatory too, that visceral fat. So my view on fat cells, also known as adipocytes, I like to call them adipocytes because I don't like using the term fat. So I'm going to say adipocytes, is that they are thousands and thousands, if not millions, of little neuroendocrine tumors is how people look at it. They secrete so much stuff. The signaling is so abnormal that it's not one of those things of it's just about fat. No, we're talking about little secreting tumors that need to be diminished and made smaller. Just as like a fun fact, anybody that perhaps gets liposuction, not often does a plastic surgeon perhaps mention that if somebody after the procedure gets above about 20% of their ideal body weight, their body will not only just increase the size of the fat cells, but they will start to kick in the secondary signal to increase the number of fat cells as well. You actually generate new fat cells.
Nice.
Correct. And but these are things that people need to think about when you're considering. So for some people, they are doing it for shape, and that's fine. And some people are trying to do something like that because they're really thinking it would make a metabolic impact, not knowing that they still have to put forth the effort and be aware of how their body works.
Right.
And so I just don't want anybody being like, I don't understand. Why did I do this? I should have known. Just as a fun fact.
Right. Now, one thing you brought up was inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So we hear a lot of talk about inflammation this, inflammation that. So can you just kind of like talk about inflammation and how you can help with inflammation?
Sure. So first of all, somebody can say my joints hurt, just like us talking and looking at their kind of elite metabolic intake questionnaire, or they didn't realize that they had signs of inflammation. So we're kind of used to the chronic, like, oh, I'm achy in my joints. Is it osteoarthritis? Is it not? Or I'm in my 30s and I'm achy. I don't understand why. So from my perspective, when I started kind of nerding out on inflammation, it's because inflammation became a bigger and bigger topic from a cardiometabolic risk, from a cardiovascular standpoint, right? And it's one of those things of, it's not just, so what if you have an elevated marker called a C-reactive protein, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, or CRP. Anybody who's seen a dermatologist and they've been monitored for conditions, or a rheumatologist perhaps, that's probably been checked. As a primary care doctor, I was checking that in my patients because it has that cardiovascular influence and concern as well. So why do we care about it? Because if there's inflammation chronically inside the pipes, our vascular system, that nettling, that inflammation, and inflammation is a vague term of there's a lot of little microprocesses that are going wrong and they're jamming up in many different ways, very simplistically. And what happens ultimately, fluently, is we're talking about a stroke, a heart attack, a purple leg, is that whatever has disrupted the plaque enough to kind of get it to float and then flap and plop, and now we've got a blocked artery. The blood flow can't go through. So inflammation from a cardiovascular, those guys, the cardiology world is finally really caught on in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, really talking and educating patients about inflammation because it's not an abstract thing. Well, what causes inflammation like gangbusters? Unfortunately, insulin resistance or diabetes, okay? But it's not just the insulin resistance. It's not just the diabetes. It's actually all these little factors that were going on beforehand, and then all of a sudden we're seeing a glucose change on somebody's labs. All of a sudden their A1C is climbing constantly, and now we're seeing, oh, they're absolutely fulminantly at diabetes. All of these little microprocesses that happened even before that were all generating inflammation as well. And it's just an even bigger tipping point once we get there. Now, in the science, we used to say, diabetes from an inflammation perspective on vascular system only causes microvascular damage, blood vessel damage, those tiny little ones. And then we said, oh, no, it's the big ones, the macrovascular. And now we're realizing, it's all of them.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's how far we keep swinging and realizing how much things are changing from a cardiovascular perspective.
Right.
So inflammation as a whole, it sounds very abstract, but let's put it into the real world. So we can actually look here at this extracellular water and total body water analysis here. And this is actually an indirect measure of edema, which is a signal for inflammation. So you can have somebody who is saying, I just feel achy, I just feel inflamed, like I just don't feel right. Maybe they feel a little bloated too on top of it. And then here we go, we do this and it's like, yes, actually. Then we get their blood labs back and it's like, and their CRP, that marker of inflammation, is up. And then we get the genetic test back, and the genetic tests say, hey, you actually have, it looks like a potential prevalence towards chronic inflammation. So what does that mean? Does that mean somebody says, I'm inflamed? No, you do things. You really do everything you can to back it down. And sometimes that inflammation is because we're not getting cellularly, kind of going back to the last conversation, of what needs to happen so that the next thing can happen, so we're not getting this buildup of kind of cofactors and enzymatic processes that are not allowed to function appropriately. So that's where that micronutrient testing comes in, which is, dang, if it's just one little blockage, great. Going back to the cardiovascular thing for a second, we talked about homocysteine, I think. Homocysteine is part of the folic acid in the B12 cycle. It's a protein, and it builds up. Well, people that have elevated homocysteine have an increased risk of cardiovascular events. That could be as simple as somebody doesn't do well with processing B12. And you can lower that because it's a secondary reaction that needs to happen with proper processing of vitamin B12. So it's not one of those things of it's all Debbie Downer stuff. It is knowing, you gotta know what's happening. And every part of this clinic has been very intentional trying to build and to answer, okay, we got this part, now we got that answer, let's get this part. Because when you try to do one lab to fit everything, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I think most people understand that. But also it needs to be very personalized. It needs to be, it's your data.
For you.
We need to know each person's data so we can
mine's
affect
different from somebody else's.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing I think that maybe we do incorrectly now is, well, so-and-so did this for them, I'm going to try it to see if it works for me, and it doesn't.
And it's not anybody's fault. It's different genetics.
Yeah, right. And so once you find these things, then what do you do?
So then we have the conversation about the goals, right? So if somebody, should we go this way?
Yeah.
And go over here? All right, let's go in here. Come on over here into this other room. Okay, come with me into my talking space.
Okay.
So let's stand here.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not going to
sit. So then it's a conversation of what can we do? Does somebody have some pretty serious vitamin things that we can address? We got to talk about bioavailability, right? So anybody can take a supplement, they can take Nature's Made, they can do whatever, but if they can't get it in, if it's not the right stuff, magnesium's a great easy topic for your audience. If anybody's taking magnesium oxide, don't. The only thing it does is help you poop.
What about magnesium glycinate?
Beautiful. Magnesium citrate.
Score.
Yes. Magnesium malate, fine. But magnesium oxide, which is a thing that is readily available, that it's almost hard to look in the back of a bottle because a lot of times they just say magnesium. That's your hint if it doesn't say what type of magnesium. But that will not help people. And so when people say, I think this is all trash, this is supplements, it's all poo-poo, and I take my magnesium, my cardiologist told me to help with palpitations, it did nothing. What did you take?
Yeah.
How much did you take? Yeah. Did you titrate it up? Did you tolerate it? Probably not, because if it was magnesium oxide, you didn't absorb it, and you were probably pooping like a goose.
Right.
So, all of these things matter in the okay, what do we got? What do your labs show? How do we address what your labs are lacking? What are we lacking as far as exercise, right? So these genetic tests, going back to when you were asking about the macros for each person, it's a matter of, look, your body doesn't process fat well. So I know you have a best friend that did nutritional ketosis and really did it well, and you're checking your blood ketones, and it didn't seem to really move the needle for you. The reason why is you are unable to process fat, possibly. There are people that have these mutations. And so you can't process what's on your body. You can't process what you consume from fat.
I love this. Because everybody, I'm going on keto. She did it. It worked for her. I'm going to,
Well, same thing, carb cycling. There are people who say that are like, carb cycling is a beautiful thing. It's never worked better for somebody.
Right.
Well, that individual who does well with carbohydrates, probably. It probably may work for them, except for the caveats of they need to know how their body manages fructose. They need to understand how fructose can be toxic to somebody, regardless of if their cells are able to tolerate fructose or not. Fructose alone is kind of like an atom bomb from an insulin, a metabolic perspective, if you're trying to do damage. So you got to pay attention to that. And I know people, well, I did this juice cleanse and it worked for me and it worked for my friend, so I'm going to have my entire family do it. It's all caveats of knowing what the person's goals are. And so this is a little bit different than people saying, just looking at fructose. Let me tell you the experience of fructose working with people. That's a different thing, because a lot of doctors don't know, don't care, and so long as it's whole food, like we've talked about, I endorse whole food wholeheartedly. However, whole food does not also fit one size.
Right.
We need to be intentional about it. No matter how hard some people are doing for sourcing their food, we have a very nutrient depleted profile for even our whole food being in the United States. This is just where we're at in society and ag, unfortunately.
And people don't believe that either.
It's unfortunate. And I'll say this, I'm going to brag here and hopefully I won't get into trouble. One of my my mother-in-law's sister. She is one of the top researchers in the agricultural world, and her husband is actually has been on what is that? What's the the big government agency? Anyways, he does restorative ag work, trying to get the soil healthy and trying to teach farmers and ranchers, not trying to, but actually does the soil samples, teaches them how they can have better crops and better animals and better yields by doing the right thing rather than pesticides and doing this. It only takes, and the tie-in here is, I did not know that it only takes about 3 nutrients in the soil profile to have a prosperous crop. That does not mean a nutrient-dense crop. That just means they've got quantity. Okay? So when we're looking at bulk and we're selling things and we're buying things, that's something that we don't think about as consumers. Like, well, if they could grow, I mean, we have to realize if, at least in Clintonville, I can't speak for the rest of Columbus, things grow like weeds around here and I don't do a darn thing. Okay, so we give it a lot of credit that something will grow, then it means that it's a nutrient-rich thing. So there are people, thankfully, that are working towards trying to make our soil better so that we do have nutrient-dense whole food, but the reality is it may not be in my lifetime. So we have to do the things to enable ourselves and our bodies to band. Let's get it through this period as much as we can, but we have to be honest about that.
Right. All right, do you want to take us in your other room, or are we good?
Oh, we're good. I have another room in the back. My 1925 building, it squeaks. I love it.
So, again, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course.
I hope you all got something out of this. If you want more information, I'm going to leave her address again for the office in the notes or at the comments at the bottom of this video. And sorry I couldn't come in live today, but they wouldn't let me record it on Facebook, so we're going to put it on here a little bit later. We really appreciate it. I can't wait for my second consultation. I'm ready to roll. Bye, everybody.